podcast where we talk to smart people, but not necessarily done by smart people?
That is an awesome question.
This one goes down probably on one of my top 5.
Hey, I like nutrition. I like to eat food.
This is the coolest thing ever. We're going to do this forever.
I wish I paid more attention in that class.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't understand that. As a man, I don't get it.
Welcome to smartpeoplepodcast.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Smart People Podcast. This is Chris.
And this is John.
We got a very interesting interview for you today.
Bullshit.
Ooh, I like that. That's actually in the title of the book. So
that's say that, right?
That's what John was. I mean, yeah.
We don't have any FCC guidelines.
I don't think so.
Is that who it is?
Yeah. The NRA? I don't know.
Whoa.
What? National Restaurant Association.
Oh. I thought you were talking about the National Radio Association.
Aha. So this week we interview, he has 2 names, and we never got to the reason why I meant to ask him. Brandon or BJ. He said he goes by Brandon, yet everything is referred as BJ. Last name Mendelson. And he wrote a book called Social Media is Bullshit. And it was funny. Well, I guess I addressed it at the beginning of the interview, but I was really hesitant. I was like, this book can't be any good. And you always want to drink the juice, the Kool-Aid behind social media. But he does a pretty good job of telling you why you shouldn't. And you're going to have to listen to the interview to figure out why. And believe me, it's a compelling case.
Yeah,
right?
It's a really good book. And we have to remind our users, follow us on Twitter at SmartPeoplePod and like us on Facebook.
Yeah, actually, we've been getting a lot of people following on Twitter, and we do appreciate it. I mean, as much as social media is overhyped and it's not really understood properly, there's a place for it. And he says that in the interview, in his book. So it is a way to connect, and we are trying to connect with you guys. And actually, we have something really cool coming up where we're going to be much more active on Twitter, primarily just to pass along the information. We're not going to be asking for anything. We just want to be able to give you guys some more of what we're learning during these interviews in digestible chunks. So keep an eye out at Smart People Pod, which is funny because social media is bullshit. At the same time, you guys are doing a great job still utilizing our Amazon widget, which is at the top of our page, smartpeoplepodcast.com, or at the Amazon tab. So I think that's it when it comes to our housekeeping items.
There is one more. Please go over to iTunes, rate, comment, and review the podcast. It helps us out. We actually had like 6 or 7 reviews come in the last 2 weeks, which is awesome. And that actually moved us up on the education chart, which was even more awesome because that meant more downloads, which hopefully means us being able to bring you cooler guests,
better guests,
cooler content, all the above.
And it's happening. We have some really cool guests lined up. So let's talk a little bit more about Brandon. A really interesting story. He has like 700,000 Twitter followers, but he did it before. This was years ago. He gained all these when he was a big believer in social media, and he was doing campaigning. And then he realized how little all of that following meant.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about it a lot in the book, but basically he went to Twitter and said, hey, I'm doing this breast cancer awareness fundraiser campaign thing, and they featured him on their suggested user list. So when a new person signs up for Twitter, he was listed on there as somebody who they should follow. And he just goes on to talk about when he actually wanted to raise money, he reached out to all his Twitter followers. And you'll have to read the rest of the book to find out what happened from that. But spoiler alert, it wasn't good.
Yeah, and he's written for the Huffington Post, CNN, MTV, Mashable, Forbes, Comics Alliance, a bunch of outlets. He does his own consulting for kind of marketing and how to connect with your customer. Really smart guy and really knows his stuff and has been battle tested. So it was a really fun interview and felt like a conversation. So go ahead and enjoy this interview with Brandon Mendelson. All right, Brandon. Well, thanks for being on today. As we mentioned in the intro, your book, Social Media is Bullshit, is really interesting. And initially, when we first talked, I was kind of skeptical. I oftentimes buy into the public perception really easily. And I'm like, oh, the news says it and the this says it and other people tell me I'm going to do it. And so I read the title of your book and I was like, I don't know about this. And then I read the line, the people who made it big during the gold rush were selling shovels. And I was like, oh my God, I've been duped. So I was hoping you could kind of, as an intro to your book, but more importantly, that point alone, tell us what you meant by that.
Yeah, my whole experience in getting into the book comes from an anti-breast cancer tour that I did back in 2010 with my ex-wife. We were big social media believers. We were big fans of Chris Brogan and Gary Vaynerchuk and Seth Godin and Guy Kawasaki. And I was like, all right, well, if social media is so wonderful, I should be able to, one, couch surf my way across America while I'm raising awareness to save money, and two, use the power of social media to raise a lot of money for a not-for-profit that I was working with. And so I set out to do that, and the tour was like a giant disaster, like in every respect. And so when it was over, I turned around to all those people. I wrote them a polite letter, and I said, hey, I'm a big fan. I've gone to your seminars. I've purchased your books, and I applied everything that you said to apply, and none of it worked. So what do you think went wrong? And the response was, well, that's not how social media works. And so that was the moment where I was like, well, hey, wait a second. This is exactly how you say it works. And I started to do some digging, and, the book is born out of 3 years of actual research. People see the title and they don't think that there's like anything to back it up, but there's about 3 years worth of research showing that these guys make these ridiculous claims, and they're pretty much baseless, not always, but 90% of the time. And it's all being done in an effort to cash in on a hot buzzword.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I agree. The book has a lot of substance to it, and it's very well done. And as I mentioned, I usually just jump into these things. I got 20 self-help books of some sort, and my thing is I like to pull out a couple of small tidbits and run with those, and that's fine. But one thing I realized, especially in this new job that I've taken and doing marketing, is everybody needs content, but there isn't enough good content out there. So people just create it, or they're just like, I mean, the top things to get read are top 10 lists and how to improve yourself with this, and let's scare the shit out of you this way. And it all, if you really dive in, it all merges together.
Yeah, there's two big issues that no one really talks about. And the first, which I start to address in the book, and I really didn't get into it as much as I wanted to, was, the big buzzword now is content marketing. Like you hear that thrown around a lot since the book has come out. And basically what they're saying is, you have to have compelling content, but then you read the advice to put that content together, and you're like, wow, this is going to get, I'm just going to generate like reams of mediocre crap. Like I'm not going to get anything following. And so there's so much bad advice as to how to create content for the web and how to make it sound. And so we buy that advice, and so it's kind of taken people's potential and really eliminated it completely because of all the bad advice and because we don't really question the stuff that comes out. The other thing is that with Google, they control over 80% of the world's search traffic. And, they'll tell you they're not a monopoly. They said that to the DOJ not too long ago in the FTC. And the FTC actually agreed stupidly. They control so much traffic that entire businesses are built around manipulating Google. And by manipulating Google, what you have to do is have these 10, the top 10 stupid things that happen to this celebrity, or just controversial things like anything that Jenny McCarthy says. Like if you ever wonder why people listen to Jenny McCarthy when she tells kids not to get inoculated because it might cause autism, people don't publish that because she's accurate. They publish it because it's crazy, and Google rewards crazy with search traffic.
It is. I mean, John, what do you think about this? John's our resident tech guy.
Yeah, and Brandon, I mean, I have to admit, when I read your book, you broke my heart. Like, I've always looked up to guys like Leo Laporte, Kevin Rose, Gary Vaynerchuk, all these guys, and I'm like, oh, they can do it, so can I. And then you pointed out the flaw in that thinking, and I was like, holy shit, he's right. Every single one of these guys had either some type of celebrity help or corporate backing help or what have you. And it's not really this, I'm going to get struck by lightning thing and this is going to happen over and over and over. Like, granted, yes, people get lucky and that kind of stuff, but you point out that there really is no coincidence that most of these smaller things that get out there are corporate backed or have been pushed by a celebrity.
You know what really bothers me is that there is a really popular Facebook page called I Effing Love Science. And it's one of the most shared. And originally I was like, oh, that's really cool. They're promoting science, and it's funny, and it seems to be organic. And then I found out I was at a conference recently, which I do not like going to those conferences at all, but I'm almost like obligated to go to a few of them each year. And I was at one of them, and they were saying that page is actually just an advertiser created that for one of their clients. But it's not a direct ad. So they're paying for pushing content out there and building fans and things like that. And then every so often you'll see, if you look carefully, they'll mention the product. And so everything, even if it has the appearance of being this legitimate organic thing, I mean, 9 times out of 10 it's not. And that bothers me because there's rarely a disclosure about it until well after the fact. Like a year or two will go by and someone will say, oh, by the way, that was Crispin Porter and Bogosky, which is a big advertising firm, and they're the ones that were behind that Facebook page. So sorry you thought it was legitimate.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I've recently started to notice too, where especially with like political posts on Facebook, there's a lot of people that share these ridiculous pictures or like conspiracy theory things, and you see stuff starting to get shared, 500,000 times or 250,000 likes and all that stuff. And I recently found out that most of those pages are built up, and then they try to get these controversial shares out there, and then they sell them off to advertising companies overseas, where they're saying, oh, okay, we got, 500,000, 1 million likes on this now. Now we're going to give it to whoever the advertiser is, and they're just going to sprinkle their advertisements throughout it. And I find it funny because these people get passionate about sharing this stuff, being like, oh, look at this fact now. And they don't realize that they're just playing into a huge marketing game.
Absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind that the NRA, what happened over at San Diego Elementary, has been doing that. That they've been propping up, like, they call them sock puppets. That's the industry term for them. And they're dummy accounts that are run by like one person, and usually that one person runs like 100 of them that pop up and create these fake Facebook pages and these fake profiles across different networks, and they're just pushing nonsense, and it looks like it's organic, but it's not at all the case.
It's almost scary how little we know, or the average person knows, about social media and where things come from. I mean, likes, for example, can be purchased for almost nothing, and there's so many fake accounts, and Facebook is really losing a lot of steam on this recently. I mean, I know they're trying to crack down because people are realizing that this advertising stream and medium isn't legit, and I don't really think it's providing any value. What are your thoughts on that?
There's 2 things that just happened recently, and that's one of the frustrating things of the book is once it's out, you can't go back and be like, oh, by the way, let me go and add like this awesome thing. So with Facebook, there's documented evidence, and it keeps coming up. Like when I first saw it, I was like, all right, well, maybe someone is just pissed at Facebook, but it keeps coming up that people are paying for likes and ads on there, and they're seeing fake clicks, or they're seeing like clicks randomly from like the Middle East.
Yes.
That they can't trace. And not coincidentally, Gawker did and Gawker, I hesitate to put them in a good light because they have really good people that work there. Drew Magary, who is the author of The Postmortal, and Hamilton Nolan. And, they're really good, but sometimes Gawker is terrible. But not too long ago, at around the same time these fake likes were happening, they did an expose talking about how Facebook has like this virtual army of people that are like the freelancers, and their job is to go and scrub Facebook with bad content. And that came out around the same time these fake link stories came out. And it's not a cognitive leap to suggest that these people are scrubbing stuff off of Facebook, but they're also clicking on people's ads, right? Because they are mostly from, they're not from the United States, and that's where a lot of people see the clicks for the different campaigns. The other thing is, at the other conference I went to 2 of them in the fall, with social media marketers, which we could talk about. And someone at Facebook approached me, and I thought she was going to punch me in the face. Like she marched up to me like I was bracing for impact. Like I thought any second she was going to pull back and like deck me. But what she said to me was, you're absolutely right in that we don't really know. Like I can tell you from the data that we see that it's so big and it's such an early stage. It's not that we can't make suggestions, but this idea that the social media marketers put out there that, Facebook is like laser focused and that you'll hit exactly who you're looking to hit. It's impossible because there's just so much raw information coming through, and they have, at this point anyway, no way to really demonstrate, okay, well, this happened on Facebook and then this happened in reality. There's some anecdotal evidence. I know someone told me about like a cupcake store in New York City that put up a Facebook ad, and the next thing they know, there was like a huge line of people.
Oh, wow.
So there's little things like that, but they can't demonstrate it across the board and say, you did this, and then you got this. But for Facebook, who 80% of their revenue is advertising, they can't come out and publicly say that. They can't go to advertisers and be like, yeah, give us money, and maybe you'll get what you're looking for. They just can't do that. So there's this myth that they almost have to peddle, which is a shame because they do have smart people working there that are solving very challenging problems. But it is a business, and they're almost forced to lie at this point.
I look at social media, and it kind of spawned from the word social networking. And
sure,
on its face, like social networking is just meant to connect people that you normally wouldn't connect to. And
right.
It does that. And you can develop friendships and stuff like that through it. But when did we start looking at it being like, oh, we're going to be able to sell this to more people now, or we're going to be able to sell our product to more people?
Well, it's funny that 80% of the people that use Facebook, or I'm sorry, 8 out of 10 of the users that use Facebook are not based in the United States. But when the economic bubble hit, with the housing market and everything back in 2008 and maybe December of 2007, we want to be technical, we had in America a whole bunch of knowledge workers laid off. And those are jobs that are not coming back. We talk about the job recovery now with our economic state. Most of the jobs that are coming back are more low-skilled labor. They're retail and hospitality and things like that. So you have this entire class of knowledge workers who lost their job in 2007, 2008, and they had nothing. So there was a lot of real estate brokers and people who worked in advertising and sales and things like that. And that's really when the social media marketing bubble started to pop up. And there were guys before that, there was like Tim O'Reilly, who's made a career for himself pretty much by selling bullshit and saying, oh, well, look at Web 2.0 and how wonderful and amazing this is. And so these knowledge workers kind of took their lead from Tim O'Reilly and Robert Scoble and Leo Laporte to a little lesser extent, and Guy Kawasaki. He's like, don't even get me started on Guy Kawasaki. But they saw them and they said, okay, there's an opportunity, and they all kind of coalesced around this buzzword of social media, and that's really when it's starting to happen, and it almost created this weird bubble of reinforcement where, like, if you go to a social media conference, there's some nice people there. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're all assholes.
Sure.
But for the most part, there's certainly this constant, like, reinforcement of what they're saying. And that sort of just kept growing and growing and growing. And some people started to make money. I mean, there was this guy named Dave Kirpin who I debated in Vegas and absolutely destroyed, by the way. And, people look at him and they see him signing multi-million-dollar deals with like Pepsi and different companies, and they go, well, there's a model for success in that. And so even though Dave doesn't know what he's talking about, and that's a factual statement, it doesn't matter because there's this market that was created from all this hype and talk, and the media got into it because at the same time all of these jobs were lost. The big corporations that own the media, people talk about like the print is dying because of advertising losses and things like that. Well, no, it's the media contracts because they're all owned by large corporations, and those large corporations wanted to cut costs, and they saw social media wrongly as like an alternative, and so they embraced it, and they forced all of their journalists to embrace it. And you can't come out of a J school now without being a true believer in social media, which has spelled a lot of trouble for me in the book. And so the media didn't question this either. So you had like these two forces coming together of all of these knowledge workers that were, rightfully looking for money, perhaps in the wrong place. And then at the same time, the national media in America saying social media is wonderful and not looking at it critically. And that's really where it sort of exploded into this entire multi-million-dollar industry.
That's what I really like is you say throughout your book, you say things don't happen on social media and then move into mainstream media. It's the other way around. I mean, it's like if something happens on TV, then it becomes big on Twitter. Ashton Kutcher's big on Twitter because he's been on TV for 10 years and all this stuff. I mean, the idea that it's the other way around, or you can just create something off of just this social media platform, is crazy. And realizing, you talk about how print is still a big deal, which seems mind-blowing to me, but I can understand it.
It's funny. Ashton Kutcher often comes up as like the social media success story.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is look at the ratings for 2.5 Men for when he came onto the show, and you could see the ratings decline. And so the theory was there was a lot of stories that, places like Mashable and a lot of technology blogs, which are very hit and miss in terms of quality, a lot of them were suggesting that Ashton Kutcher would generate ratings because of his Twitter following. And that was not at all the case. And then Shit My Dad Says was also another example of that where, it was a very funny Twitter feed, and Justin Halpern, I like him, he's a very funny guy. But there was a lot of hype about, look at all the millions of followers he has on Twitter, that will translate into ratings. And again, it absolutely did not happen. But the national American media, and this is something I found out just in the past 2 months, don't like to talk about that stuff. Like the Canadian media, if you go to my press page over at bjmendelson.com, you'll see a lot of national Canadian exposure because to them, they were all about talking about this stuff and saying, well, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't work the way it does. But in America, when you talk to reporters at the big national outlets, they'll be like, yeah, I know it's bullshit, but I can't say it. And so every year you'll see a story run. And just recently, the LA Times had this thing talking about how studio executives were unhappy with social media not producing results, but they're still spending the money on it. And that story reoccurs you can go through the archives and see virtually the same story reappear every year since 2008. And there's never any analysis from the LA Times or Variety or the Hollywood Reporter saying, well, why is this not working? And so it's just studio executives upset. And so the national media in the United States doesn't want to talk about this stuff critically. They don't want to look at it and be like, oh, well, Ashton Kutcher couldn't generate results from his Twitter following. Instead, they just want to talk about how many followers he had. And the thing with print, it's funny, in Glens Falls, I'm almost hesitant to give him a plug because he's kind of a douche, but there's a local paper called The Chronicle. It's run by this guy named Mark Frost. And he could be nice to other people, but he was always just kind of a jerk to me. And it's very profitable. And it's not anything special. It's just he figured out that when it comes to print, the thing that matters now is being local and independently owned and being able to write someone's name and then have that person pick it up and go, oh, look, I was mentioned in the paper, as opposed to the bigger daily newspaper that was in Glens Falls, the Post-Star, which is owned by Lee Enterprises, which isn't even based in New York. It's based out of Iowa. And they keep cutting costs and cutting beats and cutting coverage. And if you pick up the Post-Star, generally on the front page, it's an Associated Press story. But if you pick up the Chronicle, it's like the local Rotary Club. And that is proven across America to be a model for success in print. But it's not sexy to talk about, it's no one wants to talk about these local papers that are doing awesome because it's not a good story. The national media, there's a great book called It's Not News, It's Fark by Drew Curtis. He's the Fark.com founder. He's also a really huge college basketball fan. So if you ever approach Drew Curtis and start talking to him about college basketball, that's a good way to start things going. But in that book, he talks about how the national media in America generally focus on certain sort of stories, and they don't like to stray from them. And so because of that model and because of the economic pressure that's put on them from their and it's not to say that corporate ownership is bad. I'm not one of those corporations are evil guys, but you can certainly point to the print business and say, well, here's where they're certainly doing things the wrong way, but we don't talk about what's being done the right way because it doesn't fit into this corporate mindset. And so it's really a tragedy that we don't have these conversations, which is why I like the podcast and the smaller media outlets, because we can actually talk about this shit and be like, hey, this is a thing that's going on, but you just we won't see it in the New York Times. You will never see in the New York Times social media is bullshit.
Right.
I can tell you, I can guarantee you it will absolutely never happen because they don't want to hear it. They're very much, this is wonderful and amazing, and we don't want to run with the counter story.
Yeah, and I find it funny too because, even when you were on, I guess it was MSNBC or CNBC, one of the two, and they were interviewing you, they still even wouldn't mention the name of the full book, even though it was a cable news program. They blurted out and they, made it rhyme with the dog Shih Tzu or whatever the guy on the panel was saying. But yeah, I find it funny that, you mentioned that the media doesn't like the stuff that's not sexy because you talked to Tony Hsieh and he said that Zappos was, if not more, a success story because of the telephone as opposed to social media. But nobody ever wants to talk about that because, telephone marketing, like how sexy is that? It's not at all.
Right, and it doesn't use the right buzzwords. And every so often, to this day, people still point to Zappos and go, oh, well, it's a social media success story, even though it's been proven almost since the start of that lie that that's not true. And the CEO is out there saying it's absolutely 100% not true. But they keep pointing to it and saying, oh, look at that, because of that reinforcement bubble that happened. So, even with Tony Hsieh saying, no, you're wrong, you've got this industry of like alleged experts and gurus and ninjas and whatever they want to call themselves, reinforcing false beliefs. But, with Zappos, it's very much a story of, one, Harvard. If you pick up Delivering Happiness, it's very clear early on, which is the Tony Hsieh book, that he met the CFO at Harvard, and if he hadn't, then, Zappos wouldn't exist to this day. So, and that gets lost about Facebook too. Mm-hmm. Even with the social network that came out, when you hear stories about Facebook, it's almost a footnote. And you can see the New York Times did that recently with, there's this girl named Emma Cohen who sold a book to one of the big publishers that was originally a Tumblr blog. And originally, if you read it and you're not looking at it carefully, you're like, oh, well, this is a success story of someone starting a Tumblr blog and going viral. And then there's like almost a footnote buried deep in the story that goes, her brother is the lead singer of the band Vampire Weekend. And then you're like, oh, well, that's a horse of a different color.
Right.
And that happens a lot with Facebook and Zappos and a lot of these other companies where, the Harvard connection is almost downplayed in favor of something that's more superficial. Like the success of Facebook is pictures. I've read a lot of the history. There's the Connector, which is the timepiece about when Mark Zuckerberg was like Man of the Year or whatever it was, that they put out, and that talks about the growth of Facebook coming from photos. And then I can't think of it. There's a book about Facebook. There's a number of them, but there's one. It's like the authorized story, and I want to say it's written by David Kirkpatrick, and it makes them look good because he had direct access to Zuckerberg and all the other ones. But even in that book, he admits the Facebook growing because of photos and not because it's this revolutionary social network that people were able to play with and market things to each other. But that gets downplayed in all of these narratives from social media marketers. And so it's really fun to watch what gets selected to be the story and what doesn't. And when you talk about Zappos, it's all customer service. Zappos has over 70% retention rate with their customers. In fact, most of their customers aren't new at all. They're just people who've previously used Zappos, and then maybe they'll refer a friend, but more often than not, once they've used the service, they just keep on coming back, and that's where they make most of the money.
So I have to ask you something. Especially with the book being called Social Media is Bullshit. Do you think it's still necessary to play in the social media game, even though it hasn't proven to be as successful as, these marketers want to say it is?
It depends on where you are in life. So I'll give you an example. Just this morning I woke up and I got Google alerts for the book, because I like seeing if some people are talking about it. Mm-hmm. I pride myself on being readily accessible. Like people can email me or call me at any time, and I like being able to talk to them.
Yeah, I have to interrupt you real quick. You put your phone number in the book a couple times. Has that led to any? I mean, do you regret that yet, or
No,
has it been
not
interesting?
at all. The only thing I regret, like I'm new to Chicago. I just moved here this month,
Okay.
and at about 3:00 in the morning, I got a call from a Chicago area code. So all right, well I'll answer. Maybe it's someone who's like, oh hey, it's in Chicago, and it was at 3:00 in the morning, and this was, I swear to God, this is the conversation. I go, hello, and the guy goes, this is Saeed. I have the tools that you need. And then he hung up on me. And I was nervous because I just came back from a business trip in Seattle, and this guy who works, I can't say who he is, but he works for this company, and he was telling me that he used to work for the Department of Defense, and one of the things that he did was he worked on this algorithm of all of the calls that you make in America go through this computer, essentially, or this network of computers. And it's not that like someone is sitting there listening to your conversations, but the algorithm looks for certain behaviors and call times and keywords. And after an extended time, and I couldn't tell an extended time, is to surface you and put you higher and higher on the list. Like if you keep having conversations where you use the word bomb, for example,
Right.
and then, like he moves you up. And so the one guy I didn't call back because I just got back from Seattle and I learned about this, and I was like, yeah, that's a conversation I don't want to follow up on.
I'm gonna let that one go.
No thanks, Saeed.
Yeah, I'm gonna let it pass. But yeah, no, it's really cool because people, for the most part, they all call me. There was one person who decided they were going to have a conversation with me through text message, but everyone that has read it has called me. I haven't gotten any like negative feedback, and I think that it's sort of self-selecting. Like people aren't confrontational,
Right.
and so they're not going to call you and be like, "Hey, I think we suck." So a lot of the feedback that I get is very positive about the book, and so I like it. I like being readily accessible, and I like that people can talk to me. And I feel like that's something that, when you talk about whether or not you should be involved with social media, it depends on where you are in life. Like if you are a huge corporation, you're almost forced to have a profile on every network just because you are so big and so ingrained in the culture that I promise you someone is talking about you on any given platform.
Right.
But if you're just starting out, then it really doesn't matter. Like to me, it's almost irrelevant where you can get by just fine doing good PR, and that's really all this is. Like if you do good public relations and good marketing, then the rest of the stuff follows. Like you don't have to build up a presence on Twitter and then push out from there. You can build up a good presence in the newspapers and media, and then just happen to have a Twitter account. So what I like to tell people is this: the tools are different. Like it's not that the tools are good or bad. Like certainly Facebook is overhyped, and I would tell you never to spend money on Facebook, but if you find your demographic is mostly women 55 plus, that's the largest demographic of American Facebook users. And so if you find that that's your demographic and that's who you want to reach out to, then it doesn't hurt for you to have a Facebook presence. But it all comes down to sitting down, and that's the thing, is that we don't sit and think about this stuff. We just kind of go, well, Gary Vaynerchuk told me I have to be making YouTube videos, so I'm going to be making YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Well, no, you only make YouTube videos if you think that your content appeals to 12 to 17-year-old young men. Then you should have that conversation. And so it really all comes down to what you're comfortable with, where your audience is, what you have time for. And like YouTube is a big financial investment. A lot of people don't realize that. There are shows that get millions of views, and people go, oh, well, anyone can do that. And then you realize that those shows are produced on a budget of like $600,000 per episode. And, there's so few people that can actually go and duplicate that.
The one thing I did want to kind of piggyback on, and to our listeners who might not, care as much about social media, understand it, older listeners perhaps, is the idea that you say personal interaction is still king. I mean, that's still the way to do it. And so I really like that. I want to kind of make that message clear. Those interactions are what you still believe to be extremely strong, right?
Definitely, I was reluctant to do any sort of consulting because I felt like it was contrary to what I was trying to get across the book. But then I started watching Mad Men, And I realized, because I had been a consultant up until 2007, and I hated it because I thought that, you take your clients no matter whether or not you like them, or you take them in, just because as long as they pay the bills, you sign the contract and you do the work. And then I was watching Mad Men, and I was like, Don Draper has no contract. Like, he can go up until the most recent couple of seasons, he can go and do whatever he wants and say whatever he wants, and he can, he's got total freedom and flexibility to stay independent, but also contribute in some way. And so I was like, okay, if I can do that, like if I can work for a company and can do consulting and not have a contract and work under the agreement of, I'm going to be totally honest with you at all times, and if you don't like it, I can walk away and be like, all right, we'll see you later. I will do that. And so I did start working with a couple of startups that are technology, and they don't understand how important customer service is. And I keep saying it to them over and over, and I'm kind of like, all right, guys, well, we need to have a come to Jesus moment about this and say, this has to be important. And one of them is coming around, and the other one and the reason why is because tech companies don't think about customer relations because it doesn't scale. Like, that's what they'll tell you is, well, we can't scale this. We can't, if we have millions of users, we can't have like one or two customer service people. We would have to have a call center, and we would have to make the investment. I keep saying, oh, damn right you make the investment.
Yeah.
Because customer service drives everything. Like Zappos, all you have to do is point to Zappos and say, it was a multi-million-dollar business. That's what they were bought for. Amazon didn't buy them because they sold shoes.
Right.
Amazon bought Zappos because of the customer service model, because it's culture. Because Zappos, at the end of the day, is just a website. It's just a website that sells overpriced shoes.
Mm-hmm.
But because you can call Zappos at any point in the day and say, hey, I'm in Vegas for the first time, I don't know where to get pizza.
Yeah.
And the person, they're not going to hang up on you. They're going to stay on the phone with you until you get your pizza.
Yeah.
And so, being able to do that is important. And that to me is like key to everything. And so, that's what I've become an advocate of in doing consulting for tech companies, because tech companies generally are run by people who aren't, they're not the most people-oriented. I can't name companies, but I've seen some pretty terrible pitches to venture capitalists and things like that because they don't understand how to interact with people.
Right. Yeah.
And so, like with Facebook and Twitter, you can't call Facebook and Twitter. Like, you can, the customer service, Twitter, like, has people that work in customer service, and I know who they are because they know who I am, but good luck going and finding those people.
Oh, it's so true.
Like, if you have a problem.
Even Google.
So I constantly... What?
I was just going to say, even Google, I we use Google Apps for the nonprofit, and it took they finally have a phone number you can call, but you have to jump through all these hoops, and they didn't even have a phone number for the longest time. I'm like, how the hell are you Google and I can't even talk to somebody? It's mind-blowing.
You have to Google it, man.
Yeah.
What's really funny, though, is that back in 2007, I was a true social media believer up until the breast cancer tour in 2009 and 2010 when I re-engineered it and made it more successful. I wanted to buy this set of buildings up in Potsdam, New York. And they're these really huge historic buildings that were essentially abandoned by Clarkson University. They were the original SUNY Potsdam campus, and I guess at some point they've changed hands. And so they sat, unused, and I said, all right, well, I have this plan where I can go and turn one of them, because one of them has this old dilapidated theater, and still does, and I can turn this theater into a 24/7 multimedia show where something is always happening, and then, it's fun, and we can become a cultural destination. Like, I have this whole thing planned out. And the reason why I mention this is because I wanted to buy Facebook advertising and Google advertising, and the only way I was able to get them on the phone or meet with them in person, with Google, I said, all right, I'm going to buy like $100,000 worth of advertising. Mm-hmm. And then right away, I was able to talk to someone. Like, they made themselves available 24/7. I was able to get pricing, and that's how I found out that they control so much web traffic. Like, it's not public knowledge that they don't want you going around saying, well, they control 80% of web traffic. They don't want people to know that, especially the Department of Justice. But that's how I got them on the phone. And with Facebook, I said, I'm going to buy $1 million worth of advertising. And then the next day, I'm in New York City on Madison Avenue at their offices, having like a steak dinner with them, and talking about doing the advertising. And actually, the project was one of the things where it almost happened. And I was working with MTV and Microsoft. And at the last minute, MTV does what MTV always does, and goes, "Yeah, we're not going to do this."
Really?
Right at the last possible second, so it didn't come about. But I mean, it's sad. Like, that's the only way to get these companies on the phone is if you flash your money to them.
Oh, yeah.
And it shouldn't be that way.
It's funny that companies don't even realize that. I just came from Living Social, and I was there for a year, and just from when I started to when I left, it went from this culture of we're building something and we want, to change customer experience and local business and community. And then, you realize you got to make money, and I understand that, but you could just see consumer experience just plummet. I mean, just absolutely plummet.
Right.
And I think it's apparent, and they'll figure it out. If they would have just invested in this customer experience or service earlier, I think they could have positioned themselves, different from a Groupon or anything else. So it's the whole tech company not quite understanding.
I forgot what company it was where they were being told, I want to say it was BuzzFeed, but that might not be accurate, where they were actively being told by venture capitalists not to have humans. Like that was the advice that they were given was, we will not invest in this company if you have humans on staff, because they don't want that cost. And so it's almost this vicious cycle of tech companies being started by people who are not friendly and don't have people skills. And that's not to say that they're bad people. It's just, that there's a certain mindset, I think, that comes with being an awesome coder and being someone who's very skilled when it comes to technology. And so there's that group of people, and then those people being told not to hire humans from venture capitalists. And then there's the model of Google, Twitter, and Facebook having just awful customer service. And so the light doesn't go off in their mind, and where they go, all right, well, this is a priority. And it's just a shame. So, like, my advice to anyone, it doesn't matter what field, if you work in social media or anything, is good customer service. Like being able to, there's people that I've gone out and I've randomly just met them in person because they've messaged me on Twitter, and they're like, hey, you sound like an asshole. And I'll go, oh, well, okay, I'll be in your city like next week. Let's sit down and let's talk. And then they'll be like, oh, well, okay, you're not an asshole at all. You actually came out and you bought me lunch, and you heard about what I didn't like, and you addressed them. And my problem is I really shouldn't be doing it anymore, but I like to write jokes on the internet. I like to be funny.
Right.
And people see that, and like if you go to bjmendelson.com, there's that. I have a funny bio on it, where it says like about BJ, and it just sounds absolutely insane.
Oh,
when
yeah.
you read it, you're like, wow, this guy is crazy, and like they don't realize that it's just I'm just joking around. You
Right.
have to deal with that where people like they don't know how to respond to me, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm so big on customer service, is to address that. And so for everyone, it's different. You might just have a product that people need a little extra help with, and so it's important to always be available.
Right. No, I totally agree. And I know we took up a little more time than we mentioned, but it's an awesome topic, one that John and I are, always in some fashion, whether work or the podcast. And we mentioned, your book, Social Media is Bullshit, is really useful. I think that anybody who hops on a Facebook page and wonders what they're doing there or utilizes it at work should check it out. And you mentioned your website, which is just bjmendelson.com. Anything else, where our listeners might be able to find you or check you out, or recommendations?
Yeah, it will sound counterintuitive because I got saddled with this Twitter account I've been trying to delete.
I was
for a
waiting for
long time.
that.
I don't like promoting it because people go, oh, well, social media is bullshit. But I actually keep it to show people the story, because you can see I have like 700,000 followers, and that came from Twitter promoting my account during the breast cancer story. So I like to keep it and say, well, look at all those followers, and now ask me where they came from. And so what I've started to do is, I used to write jokes over at BJ Mendelson, but now it's become resources, the stuff that I think is interesting, or anything that I've mentioned in our talk here I have it all up on delicious.com/BJ Mendelson. People can see like all the links and footnotes and research. But over on Twitter, if I find something that I think could be useful, trying to get a foothold on marketing or PR or venture capital, I started to share it on there. So, I mean, if you want links from me or additional information, you can follow at BJ Mendelson.
Again, thanks for being on. I really appreciate you reaching out. It was awesome talking with you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you guys for having me on.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Welcome back. Hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Brandon Mendelson, the author of Social Media is Bullshit. The Facebook book that he mentioned, Facebook book, that's kind of funny, that he mentioned in the interview that he couldn't quite think of the name is The Facebook Effect, the inside story of the company that is connecting the world by David Kirkpatrick. We'll go ahead and link to that. So if you guys want to read that and see what he was talking about, you've got that there too.
Yeah, I mean, just subscribe to us. We got, we do weekly. We miss a week every now and again, but we got some great guests lined up, and it is a variety show. So you never know what you're going to tune into. It'll just promise to make your commute or walk or trip to the John more enjoyable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I find out that a lot of people listen to us while walking their dogs. All right, so just make sure you follow us at www.smartpeoplepodcast.com. Continue to be on the lookout for awesome guests.